Hi, long range hunting. Today we're going to be revisiting hammer bullets. Now you might be asking yourself, Jared, why in the world are you doing another hammer bullet video when you've already done two? Well, complete honesty, I never planned on making two. I was just going to do the one gel test and maybe at a later date do a lower velocity one. But I did the second video in response to the stupid comments on the first one. What am I talking about? This is a common problem I see. It's when you see video evidence of something, or you see pictures, etc., that is physical proof. It doesn't matter what somebody's opinion is. If that video evidence shows the opposite of what they believe, guess what? Evidence is evidence. But since they don't have any facts to actually debate, what people do is they make up stuff. I see this all the time with long-range hunting. Guys will say, oh, well, you can't kill an elk first shot at 600 yards. And then what happens? They see a video of a guy, single shot, 600 yards, elk takes a dirt nap. So who was right? Well, obviously the guy that gave the elk a dirt nap. But what they do is because they see that, and the alternative is saying, you know what, I was wrong, I don't know what I'm talking about, they try to muddy the water. So instead of saying, yes, you were right, it does work, they'll say, no, you got lucky. You didn't see how many animals he missed and wounded that's out there crippled before he made that shot. Or, one of the dumbest ones from one of the biggest morons out there, the real gunsmith. Oh, well, really, they edited the footage. It was shot 16 times, and then they had to sneak up and shoot it again. Yeah, it's that stupid. So, since we're not Hollywood, superstar editors, and even that, again, it's not going to get to that level of being able to make an animal not look all shot up. But let's just look at that real quick. You have a perfectly healthy animal. It's out there eating, laying down, whatever the case might be. A single round is fired. You watch the trace go in, and that thing drops like a rock, and its birthday's canceled. So, how is that edited? I mean, seriously, think about it. How in the world was that edited? There's no blood coming from it. It's not limping. It's not injured. It's a perfectly healthy animal. And then there's a single shot and it drops. But they cannot admit they're wrong. That ego gets to them. And so they want to sit there and try to discredit you because they can't prove you wrong. It's the same thing with this. They make up stuff. And in the comments, I get a couple of them, but the main one is, and it cracks me up. Oh, you didn't have the right twist rate on your rifle. Maybe you should read the instructions, moron. They're lying. One, they have no knowledge of what I did prior to that to even look it up. They don't know if I researched. They don't know even what my barrel twist was. I never talked about the rifle specs. So they don't even know my barrel twist. So how do they know that it wasn't stable? In fact, I do have the correct twist. I do my research. And that bullet was flying true, as I do accuracy testing. I do load development. And one of those tests is shooting to make sure that that projectile is going straight through. A lot of people don't understand, if a bullet has lost gyroscopic stability, that bullet comes out of that barrel and there's a little bit of wobble. So what's happening is that bullet's got a little bit of wobble. And as it starts to stabilize, it goes into that nice spin and what's called the bullet going to sleep. If a bullet does not go to sleep or you've lost gyroscopic stability, you're not going to get that. And so if it goes to impact something, if you are flying and you have gyroscopic stability, it's going to go in, it's going to create a hole. However, if you've got that wobble and it hits, it's not going to hit true. Now here's some shots showing perfect bullet holes. This is when you have gyroscopic stability, everything's good, it's stable. And then these are what you're going to see when it's not stable. You can see that it's hitting one of those completely sideways and the other one is hitting somewhat sideways and just tore the bottom. And that's what it looks like when you have a loss of gyroscopic stability. Now, real quick, I'm going to let you watch the gel test shots real quick. Let's break that down. The bullet traveled 4 to 5 inches, and I ended up doing 2 just because I wanted to verify that there wasn't anything wrong. So I ended up doing 2 tests. Now what happens is it's called necking over. And that's when the tip clogs, is not going to expand. It basically turns into a full metal jacket. And what's happening is that bullet starts to tumble. As that displacement starts, it's starting to tumble, and it can either start tumbling through there and it can change directions. These ones were high velocity and ended up just changing directions. This one exited out the side. Now, this is the wound cavity. Now that looks impressive, correct? Even though it did veer off, it looks impressive. But look at it from this angle. There's barely anything there for a wound cavity. It literally looked like I'd taken a knife, stuck it in the gel, and pulled it out. So was there a displacement like this? Sure. However, it never achieved hydraulic or hydrostatic shock. And so when it collapsed, there's nothing really there for wounding. You're not gaining anything. That bullet is not transferring it. And if the bullet is changing directions, it can turn out really, really bad for you. The other thing that can happen with it clogging is it's going to pencil through. Now, here's the thing. There's bullets like Sierra Match King, Lapua and ours, which are match bullets, lead core, thin jackets. So it doesn't require the same type of impact velocity or resistance in order to expand. And those bullets can do the exact same thing. So if a bullet that's much softer can do it, the hammer bullets are just increasing that probability. So on both gel tests, they did the exact same thing. It went out in different directions. Ultimately, we ended up with the exact same result, multiple tests in a controlled environment, and we're getting the exact same results. Now, the funniest part about all this, the guy that sent me was not very happy that I didn't give it a wonderful review. Here's the thing. I don't take sponsors. I've had offers, but I don't take them. I like being independent. There's no, quid pro quo or pushing products. If somebody wants to send it to me, send it, and I'll give it a good or a bad review, whatever it does. I'll let the evidence speak for itself. But he is somehow associated with him. It's kind of muddy on how he is connected, but he decided, since he runs hammer bullets and he thinks they're the greatest thing, that he would order his own ballistic gel and do his own test. Now, the funny part about it is he got the exact same result. So you can't say that mine was a fluke, because this is what he shoots. He's running a 375 Shytech with a 411 grain bullet. Now, that's not only a massive cartridge pushing a very heavy bullet at a very high velocity, he's pushing that thing over 3,000 feet per second with over 10,000 foot-pounds of energy potential at the muzzle. So he, at 850 yards, which is what he shot, had an impact velocity in the 2300s, around 6,000 foot-pounds of energy. So he had a massive potential of energy there. And what did that bullet do? Let's look. So you see this gel. You can see it goes in, according to those arrows, it starts to tumble. At one point it goes backwards, and that's where you see it get thinner. And that bullet ends up tumbling again and then exits the second block going up. So he is shooting at 850 yards. So again, it's coming in on target. It's dropping in on that parabolic curve. So when it's dropping down at an angle, goes in the gel and then diverts and goes up, that's a change in direction. That's not what you want. So not only did it tumble, but it also changed directions, necking over, and gave the same result. And here's the ironic part. Both of my tests had 45 inches of penetration going straight into that gel. So did his. And here's the thing. People say, oh, well, it wasn't stable. Well, if it wasn't stable, it wouldn't have a perfect hole through it. It would have went 4 to 5 inches in before changing directions. So he got that same result, and that's what he runs. With that potential energy, he should have obliterated. That block shouldn't even be there, because the amount of transfer of energy of that is incredible. If If he had a different bullet, it would have been a much different result. But again, ultimately, he got the same result. Now let's go and look at a similar velocity hit, but with a 308. So we're going to be comparing a 375 Shy-Tech, which is a 50 cal cartridge neck down to 375. He's running over 3,000 feet per second, and he's also got an incredible amount of potential energy. Now, this is at 2,300 feet per second. This was from episode 1 of our terminal ballistic testing, and that's a 168 grain ELD match out of the 308. Now, you can see from this permanent wound cavity that it goes completely through, and the main body of it is around the same thickness versus his, where you can clearly see it's tumbling, and then you have that thin spot. Now, that thin spot where that bullet ended up going through backwards is about the diameter of the bullet, or a little larger. So, if you get good performance, and you can see from other gel blocks, you're seeing that cavity, and it doesn't neck down and have a really thin part in the middle and then expand back out. When you see that, that means it's tumbling. So to look at those two, the 168 grain had a good transfer of energy. It's got a 2-inch wide permanent wound cavity, and it goes straight through the entire thing, whereas his is a much larger cartridge with a 411 grain bullet with almost 4,000 foot-pounds of energy more potential, and all it did is tumble. It didn't leave a good wound cavity, and then it changed directions and exited out. So in that case, the 308 outperformed around the same impact velocity. So to say it's some kind of fluke or it wasn't stable, he's hitting a 6-inch by 6-inch target at 850 yards. You're not going to be doing that if it's unstable. So put that to bed. It was completely stable. If not, it wouldn't have went in like it did. It's just bullet design. In response to a lot of those guys trying to claim that it's wonderful and good, and saying, oh, you should go with the lighter bullet. Well, I know, but that argument is irrelevant, because here's why. They make the bullet. Yes, with a solid, do you want lighter bullets at higher velocity to reduce that mass in order to give you better performance? Yes, that's really what you have to do. So them saying, oh, well, a 214 grain bullet is too heavy, you shouldn't have done that. They sell that bullet. I'm not running it out of a 308. I'm running it out of a Magnum. And so we're pushing high velocities with that in a Magnum, which is what they would have designed it to be used for. Here's the thing, though. If all these guys, including me, are saying they shouldn't have one that heavy, but they still do, then that's the problem. Not me. I didn't make that bullet. They did. They are selling a bullet that's going to give you poor performance, especially because of the weight of it. So if my using it is wrong, then why did they produce it? What that tells me is they really don't have a good grasp of terminal ballistics or bullet construction. Just calling it how I see it. Because if it was me making those bullets, why would I make too heavy of one that isn't going to perform as well if I need them to be a certain weight? Again, just saying. Now let's dive in real quick to that second video. Now this first part of it is a mule deer. Now, this is one that people wanted to argue with about shot placement and everything. But what this does is show not only that what my test showed was correct, and again, this is from Hammer's own YouTube channel, but what you're going to see is that deer is angled away. He hits it, and if you slow it down, which I'm going to, you can actually see where it hits right behind the shoulder high. So the shot placement wasn't even there. It should have been much further back. Now, people try to say it's right in front of the rear leg, but you can clearly see that's not the case. So what that bullet is going to do is, if it had flying true, it would have just went in and blown out right in front of the other, in front of that shoulder. It would have basically separated the leg from the body. Instead, what it did is change direction. So you're going to see it hit, and then you see it go off to the right. Now, what happened here, and people say, oh, well, yeah, that's terrible performance. It dropped on the spot. Did it drop on the spot? Yes, it did. However, if you watch the end, you can see its head moving around. That bullet nicked the spine. Now, they try to claim that didn't happen, but yet they turned off their comments on that video. Wonder why. But it shows that I got that bullet changing directions, and that one was even more extreme than what I got. So now you have hammer bullets, a video of a live animal doing the same thing. It hit the spine. It was paralyzed from the shoulders down, and you can see its head working around. Plain and simple, what we do know is that bullet went in. It was a bad shot placement, and the bullet changed directions inside the body. And quite honestly, if it hadn't gone the way it had and hit the spine, who knows what would have happened. Because, again, he probably would have had to shoot it again just because it didn't work. Now we're going to go to the second video of this, and this is on an elk, and this is, again, on their YouTube channel. But what I want you to do is watch. This is a high shoulder shot. Now, contrary to popular belief, people think the leg goes straight up. The leg doesn't. The leg actually goes up to the body, and then it actually angles forward and then angles back. Now, the top part of that high shoulder blade actually covers the spine. Now, the lower part of that blade is just below the spine, and there's the lungs there. Now, a high shoulder shot is a CNS shot. If you hit it, it's going to drop dead on the spot. If you hit the higher part, it's going to go through the spine. It's going to cut all signals to the brain. It's going to drop dead. Now, if you hit that lower part, that bullet's going to go through, and that temporary wound cavity, hydraulic shock or hydrostatic shock, is going to cause flex and end up breaking and severing that brainstem. It's shutting everything down. It's destroying the chest cavity in there. That is a drop on the spot shot. So you hit it there, lights out, it's down. Now on this video, however, he does a high shoulder shot and he gets the lower part a little on the back side of it, but he does hit that lower part, and then you can see it blows out the other side going through the other shoulder. Now this was closer range, high velocity with a Magnum. You can see that elk just walked off, but that bullet blew straight through, and because it didn't have a good energy transfer like this, you're not going to be shutting down that CNS. So did it puncture the lungs? Yes, but it went off, and then as those lungs are collapsing, it then falls over and is sitting there on the ground kicking and everything else. So again, all bullets kill, period. Saying it kills does not mean jack. It's how efficient it kills, but this one did not drop it with a CNS shot. It blew straight through, causing minimal damage, and that animal ended up succumbing to that. Now, I've had a couple guys that don't understand basic anatomy try to say, oh, well, that was a behind the shoulder shot, and it's not uncommon for them to walk off. I would agree with you if he was shooting behind the shoulder. But again, that was a high shoulder shot. Following the trace, you can see the impact where it hit and knowing anatomy. So that animal should have dropped like these.
Dumped him.
And again, people try to say, oh, well, it's a spine shot. The spine is covered by part of that shoulder. So yes, even if you're going underneath, it's still going to damage that spine. If you have proper performance, it should just drop. Now, I'm going to bring you to my next point. And again, this is Hammer's own video. Now, this is a test they did. Now, you can't tell anything from that. Why? Because one, it's so far away. If you look at my camera setup, it's right there next to it. And I have mine loose. Theirs is literally strapped to a table, and the camera is, I don't even know how far away. So you're not being able to really see anything. You're seeing a bullet hit. You're seeing a wound cavity created. It's not in slow motion, so you don't see the energy transfer. All you see is a permanent cavity, and even at that distance, you really can't tell what's going on. And then it switches over, and they shoot another bullet through and say, okay, well, this is one of our bullets, this is another bullet. How do you think they performed? Well, I don't know. You didn't show up close for the video. You didn't do slow motion. You did not go up close and show the permanent wound cavity, giving measurements. We don't know anything about that permanent wound cavity. We don't even know the bullets. They didn't even show the bullets afterwards. So we've literally got zero data out of this. Now, I've seen this kind of thing before, and it's an instant red flag. And what it is they're trying to make the product look good and kind of do it in a shady way. Again, that's just my 2 cents based off experience. There's a guy I know that did that. He has a bag company for shooting bags, and he did a video trying to prove his was better. So he took the one he was trying to beat, and he had a tripod there, and he takes the bag about 6 inches above it and drops it. It hits the tripod and falls off. Then he takes his bag and he goes 3 inches over, drops it, it starts to fall, then he grabs it, settles it in nice and says, look, it's so much better. Well, it's a BS test. He didn't do it a fair and equal comparison. He did something to try to make his product look good and did it in a shady way. Hammer bullets, this is my equivalent of that. They have the camera clear in Timbuktu, so you can't see anything, so we're not getting any valuable data out of that. For a bullet company to not want to show up close and compare all that stuff, the stuff that they brag about, why would they do that? It doesn't make any sense. Now, going back to some of the lies that are out there, one of my favorites is the whole, from the lead-free crowd, is that, oh, well, I have seen or I've had x-rays taken, and I know that it sends these micro fragments of lead all over the place. If somebody tells you that, they are lying to you, or somebody lied to them. Think about this for a second. Who is going to take an elk and go pay to have it x-rayed? I've packed a lot of elk out. Heck, I packed a lot of animals out. Heck, I've thrown a lot of animals in the truck, but I have never gone in and had one x-rayed and paid for it. Now, I had one of the guys in a different video on the comments, he kept trying to say that. He's a solid guy. And he's like, oh, well, I had it done personally, so I know. Well, that throws up the BS meter again, and so I started questioning him on it, and it unraveled pretty quick for him. Here's his explanation of it. So he goes out on an elk hunt, shoots an elk with a all copper bullet, a solid, specifically a Barnes triple shock. That right there should stop you. If he's saying that he knows that all these particles of lead and everything go everywhere inside the meat, and he said he had an elk x-rayed, but he shot it with a solid copper bullet that does not have lead, that right there is a red flag saying this is bullshit. Just plain and simple. And the story gets even weirder. Now from there, he breaks down that elk, processes it, and then takes the meat in to be ground at a processor's. Okay, a little weird if you're going to process it and then take it in and pay somebody else to do it, but whatever. So he takes this meat in there, he gets it back, all this hamburger meat, and finds a piece of lead in it, he says. So his wife decides they're going to call their friend who's a vet, and they're going to go and x-ray hamburger meat. And they found lead fragments everywhere. And that's how he knows how far lead fragments from a bullet that has lead in it will go from the wound. If you believe that, seriously get a head scan, because that makes no sense. Now, something with butchers, what they do is some of them are very shady. They won't clean meat. They'll accept anything, even if it's gut shot. They don't clean around the exit hole. They don't wash it. They don't do anything. They just throw it up there, cut it up, grind it up. And a lot of times you're not even getting your own animal. They just will give you a certain percentage of weight. So if it really was his animal, he shot it with a bullet that doesn't even contain lead, and it wasn't shot prior. So his argument's already destroyed right there. Then you get to the fact that if indeed he got meat back that had lead in it, that is because of a shady butcher and somebody else's animal that he's getting and it wasn't taken care of properly. But then the fact that you would x-ray hamburger is just weird. You can pull hamburger apart. You don't need to x-ray it. But even let's say if we do, you x-ray it and find this lead in there. That still does not tell you what it's going to do on an animal. That does not validate your argument that you know that it's gone so far. The x-ray thing is complete and utter bullshit. So don't buy into that. Don't listen. It's completely false. Just plain and simple. That's That's another one of those things they make up to try to strengthen their argument. Now, you'll know from the previous video, I did an arrow analogy of you have arrows and basically those broadheads are what determines it. You know, a mechanical that opens really wide is like the new bullets of ELD match, Burger hybrids, TMKs, etc. And it's going to penetrate good, open up, and cause massive trauma. Very, very effective for, you know, traditional hunting bullets with an impact velocity of 2,200 feet per second and higher. I did the analogy of a 1-inch 2-blade cut. You have a smaller wound cavity from cutting than you would with that mechanical broadhead that's like the ELD match Burger hybrids. Now, if you take that 1-inch cut one and you dull the blades so that it doesn't cut, and so you're not getting even that 1 inch, you're going to get the main arrow that's pushing through. That's what a solid is like. So you're already at a disadvantage just based on construction. Now, they can do different things to try to help it expand and work better, removing material, weakening certain parts of it. And another way to explain it is with vehicles. So let's take a Ferrari. Ferrari is nice. It's designed by the best people to be the most aerodynamic. It's really, really fast. And then you take this van. Now, there's nothing aerodynamic about this. And that's like hammer bullets and other solids. You're limited on what you can do as far as aerodynamics. Now, could you lower that? Could you chop the hood to give it a little bit more aerodynamics? Sure. Is that ever going to be as aerodynamic as that Ferrari? No. It can't be done. So without physically changing the entire thing. And even then, just because of the size of it. So it's one of those things, those harder metals, they have all different types of designs and modifications, but it's still not going to compare to those good precision lead bullets. Just plain and simple, that Ferrari is always going to be more aerodynamic. Now, can you take both of them racing? Can you soup that van up and take it racing? Sure. But again, end of the day, that Ferrari is always going to be more aerodynamic and faster. Now, these bullets, you know, just dive into construction of them. Again, solid, certain ones have parts that are removed, weakened in order to aid in that expansion. Hammer bullets, they're not. Basically, if you look at this, it's one solid piece and they have a hole in it. So you're not getting any aid in trying to weaken it to expand. What they claim it does is it's going to hit, and it's that first part of the bullet's going to open up and it's going to end up fragmenting into several pieces. Those are going to go forward and create their own small wound channels. And then the rest of that bullet is going to plow through, giving superior terminal ballistics. That might sound good to somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, but it's a load of crap. Because the wider that opens, and as it plows through, the more trauma and energy is going to be dumped. So you're going to hit, it's going to start to expand, you're going to start to get that displacement, and then those petals break off. Basically, you have a full metal jacket. That bullet is not expanding anymore. It's not opening up to get that surface contact to transition to try to achieve that hydraulic shock. Now, I talk about hydraulic shock and hydrostatic shock real quick. I talked the last video about it, but hydrostatic shock is under 2,200 feet per second or over if you don't have good bullet performance. And that's that temporary wound cavity created by the bullet going in. And what's happening is with hydrostatic shock, you're getting a displacement. How big is going to depend on performance of the bullet. So you get that displacement. Well, after that displacement, it's going to collapse back and you're going to have the permanent wound cavity. Permanent wound cavity, if you don't achieve hydraulic shock, is going to be around the same size as that projectile going through. So if you have 0.7 of an inch of expansion, that's what your wound cavity is going to be, or slightly larger. Now, if you get into over 2,200 feet per second, that same temporary wound cavity with hydraulic shock is going to stretch beyond the elasticity point of the media or the animal. So organs like heart, lungs, liver are non-elastic, which is why they are affected by that transfer of energy. So a lot of guys will say, oh, I got good results, that, you know, the chest cavity was sloshing around, and they're getting stuff like this where the organs are whole, the blood has just filled that cavity. So is that actually hydraulic shock? No. Basically, you hit it, there's massive blood going through there, and it creates that. This is hydraulic shock with good bullets like ELD match and Burger hybrids. Now, as you can see on this deer, there's blood spots around. You can see the gut pile down on the bottom left. But right at the exit hole, it was a quartering shot. That was where it exited. It was facing towards us a little bit. 40 yards, 308, 168 grain ELD match. And that blood going from the exit wound is where 90% of the chest cavity was blown through. It literally vaporized the entire chest cavity and blew it out. So those spots that look like blood and what's on my arm and hands, that's actually the chest cavity. If you look at this one, you can see that, are there pieces of organs? Yes, but they're just floating in there. All the stuff blew up and it's just little chunks. It's sludge. You know, if you look at these ones, these are the same kind of thing where you can squeeze it in your hand and it just goes through. It's mush. So the problem is with that design, they're not opening up enough to cause that type, even with the high enough velocities. They're not opening up enough and it's taking too much resistance. And with those pedals breaking off, you're never going to be able to achieve that hydraulic shock and get these type of terminal results. Well, those terminal results are what quickly kills an animal. So the fact that it can't do that based on construction and design, it's setting you at a disadvantage. You know, hydraulic shock's the best thing in the world because not only you have the big wide wound cavity from the bullet, but inside that animal, that temporary wound cavity goes beyond the elasticity point and effectively becomes the permanent wound cavity. So you're getting a lot more internal damage. And before anybody says anything about, oh, it damages too much meat, this is one that I shot with an ELD match at 724 yards with my 300, 208 grain bullet. You can see the entrance hole is just almost like it's pinning in. And then we had massive trauma, and that's the exit hole. Again, a giant portion of that chest cavity was blown out on that deer. But you're not losing a lot of meat. You just cut out that section around it, and then the little bit that's by the entry hole. But that bullet, the ELD match, it's designed, it's more aerodynamic, and it's actually going to go in because of that. It doesn't have as much surface contact as a round nose, so it's actually going to penetrate in and then open up. So there's not a lot of meat loss, and it didn't go anywhere. So the whole like meat loss thing, if you get a lot of trauma, it's kind of ridiculous. You can have hydraulic shock and go through there and obliterate everything, and it's not going to damage a bunch of meat. So the whole argument that a solid is somehow superior, whether it's a hammer bullet, and it's funny, I've had guys try to say, oh, well, that's not a solid. Why are you calling it a solid? A solid simply refers to one solid metal. You're not having a mixture, so it's solid copper. It's not a lead core jacketed bullet with a copper jacket. So it's just simply one metal. I mean, you can have a solid that's solid brass. So solids just refer to one solid metal. When I talk solids, I'm talking about solid copper. Just plain and simple, these solid copper bullets are not going to compete. People can try to twist it however they want. They can sit there and try to argue and, make stuff up about rifle twists or, this, that, and the other that I don't know what I'm doing or anybody else who's had the same thing. If you can look at evidence of my test, the guy who sent me's test, then hammer bullets themselves showing poor performance on game, I don't know what to tell you, quite honestly. And before anybody asks, I'm not associated with anybody. I could care less. And this is another part that cracks me up. It's only the solid crowd that comments on these bullets, and it's mainly the hammer. This isn't the first bullet I've done a bad review on. Lapua Sonar's got a bad one. The Sierra Match King got a bad one. DRT, which again, all those are lead. DRT, their terminal match, got a terrible review. But none of these guys are commenting on that. It's only when their solids get a bad review that they jump on and say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Yet they have no problem with all the rest of the tests. So it's one of those things, you can't argue with results. Just can't. Now, the bullet was stable in all those instances. It did exactly what I've seen. Again, the construction, it's not anything crazy. This is necking over and penciling through is very common between full metal jackets to boat tail hollow points in lead bullets. So trying to say that this one is somehow immune to that, it's not. They do the same thing. A lot of times what people are seeing too is that bullet tumbling, and that's where they're like, oh, well, it opened up and blew out. No, it tumbled. But again, tumbling isn't a good thing. And it can happen really fast. I've seen it within an inch of going in where it's diverted. I saw a guy one time who shot a deer with a hammer bullet, and it went just inside the ribs and diverted and went back into the guts. So not only did he not reach the vitals, but he ended up gut shotting it and having to shoot it multiple times to get it down. So changing direction, if a bullet is necking over, that is an automatic no-go. Just plain and simple. Now, again, as I say it a million times, any bullet will kill. Even if it pencils through with the full metal jacket or a Botel hollow point, as long as you impact an organ, it's going to end up dying. Just plain and simple. It's not like a human where we can have surgery on it, use quick clot, apply pressure. The animal doesn't have that option. So ultimately, it's going to expire if you put a bullet in it. That doesn't mean that that translates to good performance. So I know I'm going to get a lot of people trying to argue. Quite frankly, I don't care. The results are what they are. Plain and simple. It's either they're good or they're not, and I move on. The only reason I keep doing these is just because of people trying to argue with it. So I'm going to keep plugging through different videos. I got a bunch of different bullets to put through gel. Again, I already know what these things are doing just because I've used them. I've seen the results. These are just to show people who don't know the terminal ballistic side of it and help educate people. So you're going to see the permanent wound cavity, all the data I collect. You're going to see the temporary wound cavity. And that way, when you go out in the field, you can have an idea. And I can also support those with showing actual pictures of them and even videos. So everybody be safe out there. Good luck this season. Happy hunting. Not that hard, people.
Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notification bell so you won't miss out on any future video. And happy hunting.